From becoming so weak that they couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs, to completely losing interest in their wives, and even one man cutting off his own fingers, the Minnesota starvation experiment became one of the most disturbing studies in human history. In this video, we'll break down why the Minnesota starvation experiment revealed a massive flaw in modern dieting, and why even 80 years later we still fall victim to it. In the mid-1940s, during World War II, Ancel Keys and his colleagues began on one of the most radical human experiments ever conducted. They screened hundreds of applicants until they narrowed it down to 36 participants, men who were about to go through some of the most psychologically damaging experiences of their lives. For the first few months, before the semi-starvation began, the researchers at the university gathered every possible baseline measurement imaginable, from height, weight, chest size, blood volume, eyesight, hand-eye coordination, bone density, lung capacity, and more. And they wanted to quantify everything as best as they could in the human body before they began to break it down. The goal was to see what happens to the body when put under extreme conditions that many were facing in the concentration camps and with people all across Europe at the time. And so it began Phase 2. 36 men starving beneath the University of Minnesota Stadium in the name of science. They cut their maintenance calories in half, which averaged to about 1,570 calories each. Some ate more, some ate less. They were also required to walk 22 miles per week, spend 30 minutes on the treadmill, and keep up with the courses that they were put in at the university. This was designed to replicate the food found in Central European countries during famine, which included whole wheat bread, potatoes, cereals, and lots of turnips and cabbage, with very little meat and dairy products. They were expected to lose 25% of their body weight over the next 6 months. And although this does seem fairly extreme, it is not too far off from what people are recommended when they are told to just eat less and move more, which just might be the worst possible way to sustainably lose body fat. To many mainstream influencers, it is as simple as calories in, calories out, which in some sense is true. If the goal is to lose weight, then we need to expend more energy than we consume. But this is drastically oversimplified and doesn't take into account the true complexity of our bodies. And sure, you might lose some weight, but what exactly are you losing? Body fat, muscle, water retention? For the first few weeks of their 6-month semi-starvation phase, the 36 participants did seem to have a decent amount of energy while continuing their daily activities. Sure, they noticed a little dip in energy, were a little hungry, but nothing drastic. But as time went on, the lack of proper fuel started to add up. The days began to drag out longer and longer, making it feel like there was no end in sight. Each morning they would wake up, step on the scale, and hope for extra bread and potatoes, which they were only given if they were losing weight too quickly. As their mental health slowly began to deteriorate, some of the men started hoarding cookbooks and became obsessed with anything that had to do with food. Now, obviously, our bodies aren't a closed system like a bomb calorimeter, which is the device scientists use to burn food and measure its calorie content. The human metabolism doesn't work in isolation. There are countless of other moving parts that influence how our bodies use and store energy. When you restrict the amount of food that your body needs, your body essentially thinks you are in a food famine. It slows your metabolism to conserve energy, thyroid function tanks, and hormones like testosterone plummet. So it was no surprise that the men lost all interest in women, even including their wives at the time. Some of them even joked that it became like a game to see who could last the longest with their wives, as most of them completely lost interest. But behind this dark humor was something a little scarier. Now you might be thinking, okay, sure, but that was an extreme calorie restriction. Most people don't go that far. For context, the men in the Minnesota starvation experiment were eating about 50% fewer calories than maintenance, and these were already lean, healthy men. Now compare that to the Biggest Loser contestants, many of whom had excessive amounts of body fat. Their calorie cut was even steeper, about 60 to 70%, some of them eating as little as 800 calories per day. Now obviously, if you've seen the show, you'll see that they do lose weight, and the same goes for the participants in the Minnesota starvation experiment. Jim Graham, one of the participants in the experiment, stated, "I'd look in the mirror and see that my eyes looked hollow. My cheeks were only a thin covering for the bones of my face, and my hair was getting thinner. And the Biggest Loser contestants, most of them did lose hundreds of pounds. But what's the point if, in the end, it leaves you worse off than when you started? Nearly all of the Biggest Loser contestants gained back the weight, some even ended up heavier than when they started. And the men from the Minnesota Starvation experiment, many of them became so weak that they couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs. So when the 6 months of the restriction finally ended, and it was time to refeed again, they expected some relief. At first, there was joy, food, and laughter, and a sense of freedom. But soon their depression actually grew even worse than it had been during the semi-starvation phase. Why? Because even after 3 months of refeeding, most of them couldn't regain the weight that they had lost. Their bodies were refusing to bounce back. Now, it sounds like the opposite of the Biggest Loser problem, but it's really the same story. Both groups lost control of their metabolism. They essentially broke their bodies. The Biggest Loser contestants struggled to keep the weight off, and the Minnesota Starvation participants struggled to put the weight back on. This is why reducing everything to calories in, calories out completely misses the mark. It ignored how the body adapts, how hormones, metabolism, and energy systems all work together to maintain balance. Contrast this with Angus Barbieri, the man who fasted for over a year straight. You might think that's even more extreme, but to the human body, it actually wasn't. Because fasting, when done properly in the right context, doesn't break your metabolism. It can actually restore it and help it function properly. It has nothing to do with calories in, calories out. Now, if you're feeling like your own biology is working against you, and you want to learn these 7 timeless principles that actually optimize it, you can grab the free guide in the description below. It breaks down the exact levers I use to keep everything running smoothly without relying on some magical supplements or the latest fitness hack. The starvation experiment is definitely more on the extreme side of the eat less motto. But although some people do actually take it this far while dieting, many people unknowingly follow a lesser version of the same thing. This can build a slow progression of similar side effects, even if to a lesser degree. In fact, some people need to eat even more to ensure that they are hormonally and metabolically healthy before they can even consider dropping the food quantities. But this is only effective if you are eating something close to what approximates a proper human diet, like a carnivore diet for example. So ideally, if you are eating the proper foods, you can actually listen to your hunger signaling hormones, meaning that if you're hungry, you should eat, while leptin, the hormone that tells you when you're full, will fire when it's supposed to. After all, before civilization, there would have been nothing else to rely on other than our hunger signals. Generally speaking, this is why our bodies thrive in either a fed or a fasted state, because for most of human evolution, there wasn't much in between. There was a reason humans hunted mammoths to extinction. We've known for decades now that the majority of our food came from large ruminant animals for essentially the entirety of our evolution as Homo sapiens sapiens over the past 300,000 years. Meaning that when food was available, it was abundant, and most of our energy needs would have came from fat and protein. So it's not surprising that the main hunger signal in humans is directly tied to the amount of complete protein we consume, what's known as the protein leverage hypothesis. And if we couldn't make the kill, we simply just didn't eat. We fasted. Our bodies seem to struggle in this modern in-between stage. It's as if the body says there's barely enough food, but this is all we're getting, so let's try to slow everything down just to survive. Another one of the biggest flaws in the eat less, move more movement is that it trains your brain to believe being healthy requires extreme measures or constant obsession. During the starvation phase of the experiment, their entire sense of self began to break apart. They started losing their identity. Everything revolved around food. They hoarded cookbooks, watched people eat in restaurants, and some even admitted to feeling envious of pigeons on the streets because at least they were allowed to eat the breadcrumbs. Now I know this seems extreme, but this is what many people do in a smaller, quieter way when they severely restrict how much they eat and don't allow their body proper nourishment. For many, this drastically backfires. It leads to obsession, guilt, and the constant feeling that you have to control every little thing just to lose some weight or look a certain way. And this is exactly what Maxwell Maltz, a plastic surgeon and the author of the book Psycho-Cybernetics, discovered during his practice. He noticed that some of his patients completely transformed their lives after surgery, while others, even with perfect results, stayed the same. And a lot of this had to do with the fact that they still saw the same person in the mirror, Maltz realized it wasn't the surgery that changed them, it was the shift in the self-image. And it's the same with health or trying to build a better body. Instead of falling into the trap of overanalyzing calories in, calories out, it is often best when you embody the identity of a health-conscious person, and the right habits usually follow by default by reprogramming your subconscious brain. So although the Minnesota starvation experiment may seem extreme, it's really not far off from what many people are doing today when they are told just to eat less and move more. The real key isn't eating less, it's eating the right foods so your body can finally do what it was designed for. And if you want to see how one man went an entire year without eating a single calorie and actually improved his health in the process, be sure to check out this video right here.